All right, welcome back everyone to Jface Games. I've been on a Cosmere kick because it's a Kickstarter right now, and I'm looking into the features that I thought sounded cool mechanically, and I want to know more about them. So today, what you'll see in the background here are weapons, because I wanted to know what the weapon features were. If for those that don't know, Cosmere RPG is what was previously going to be Stormlight RPG. It is a D20 based system. It's a TTRPG, and what they have is you have skills, which just like any other D20 game, I guess you could say, or a D20 rollover game, where you roll a D20, you add your attribute score, and you add your skill. So there's ranks of skill. So let's say you have an attribute of strength that's 3, and you have 2 skill ranks in climbing, then you would roll a D20 plus 5, right? Excellent. Well, one of the other things you have in the game are things called expertise. And what expertise are, there's a couple different ones. They have ones that's like a cultural expertise, which means you know the languages of those people and you know their cultures, etc. And they have a couple other ones. I'm not going to go into those because one of the ones they did have that I was interested in was you had an armor expertise and a weapons expertise. So what you'll see here on the right, on the far left, you have hero weapons, light weapons, heavy weapons, special weapons. And you can see that they have a trait, and then they have this expertise trait. And what this means is that, so if you've ever played like 5e, Dungeons and Dragons, some weapons have special traits that you get to use when you have that weapon in hands. Well, that makes it tricky from a design perspective because you're like, oh, I want to make hammers awesome and do knockbacks. But then anyone who holds a hammer can do a knockback. And so it's like, that makes it tricky. Well, what they did is they parsed that out. Right? So these are the traits are things that are for everybody. If you have this weapon, this is what you have. But if you have an expertise in that weapon, then you can unlock this expertise trace. So that's cool. I thought that was a really cool concept mechanically. So then I wanted to know, well, what does that actually look like? Right? And so here are some of the ones. And right off the bat, you're not going to be able to see this one. I'm going to drag this out real quick just for a hot second. But here is dangerous. And a dangerous weapon, I thought was interesting because a dangerous weapon, what I love about this is already, there was some comments on the last video I had about the plot die and how sometimes it can be challenging when you get opportunities or you get the other word, which is in essence like a bad thing happening. I forget the word. It starts with a C. When you get these events, it's up to the GM to determine what the hell does that mean thematically. Well, I love that they're already embedding these into some of the language. So now this is if a player has a dangerous weapon and they happen to roll one of these bad symbols on the plot die. Well, now this might mean that they actually accidentally graze an ally that's close by. And grazing, if you remember, means that you would do the weapon damage, but without the attribute bonus. So if you rolled a d8 weapon damage and you rolled a 4, you would do 4 damage to your ally. But to the enemy, if you hit them, you would do 4 plus your strength, right? So that's the difference. So I thought I love that they're adding those into the actual mechanics. And so here again, here's deadly. So this is a scenario where if you actually successfully get an opportunity, whether by rolling a d20 and getting a 20 or rolling the plot die and getting one of those 2 sides, you can immediately cause an injury to that person. That's crazy because injuries can be pretty rough in this game. And so once again, you have to remember also that I wonder if this means that if the enemy has a weapon that's deadly, if you could use that as a negative effect, or I don't know how if NPCs could they ever do this? Maybe not. Defensive, I thought was really cool. So let's look at a defensive weapon, which was I think the bow staff. Right? So staff over here, the staff is defensive in nature. And what that means is that in this game, if you wanted to have a better chance of defending yourself, you would take the brace action. But in order to brace, you have to have cover nearby you. This is pretty cool because you can see the shield naturally has defensive as a trait. But if you have the bow staff and you're an expert in it, then you have defensive as a trait, which means you can brace without having, you can be in the middle of a field. As long as you got your bow staff, you can still brace. That's pretty cool. Discreet just kind of makes sense. You can hide something. Indirect. This is a weird one. I'm bringing it back down. Indirect is a weird one. This is in essence, if there's a reasonable arc of, even though you don't have line of sight for a target, if there's a reasonable arc that you can manage. So the javelin and the sling have, I don't see this. The sling's down under ranged maybe. I forget where it was. But the sling, here it is. Sling, longbow, sorry. The longbow and the sling and the javelin are all indirect, meaning you can lob them. So you might have line of sight, but you can lob them. It just might be one of those weird scenarios of determining, could I actually lob it there, right? So who knows? Loaded is interesting. So loaded, there are different weapons that have, so the crossbow is, I think, the main one on here that has load. But in essence, it's like a jam, right? So normally you have a load and you put in whatever amount, and at some point in time, if you roll in these bad symbols, your ammo, you kind of run out really quickly. Momentum, this might be the coolest one in the game that I've seen thus far, and this might make hammers unreal. So what this does is that hammers are the ones I really see it. So a hammer and a mace. And if you have hammer, so first off, it's D10 impact. So it's a big old weapon. But what momentum does is when you attack, if you can run 10 feet and attack someone, you gain advantage. So going back to what we were talking about with the plot die, if you can figure out a way to get the plot die activated for an attack and you're running at someone from 10 feet, you're going to have, 60% chance of max damaging, because you might be able to do advantage on the plot die to make sure you get what you need. So to me, you might see, and it makes sense, because if you've ever played the game, or if you've ever read the books, these freaking shard bearers that are running around with hammers in that game that don't yet have shard blades are just smashing people. Offhanded's really cool. Offhanded is, in this game, if you wanted to have a weapon in your offhand and attack, it takes 2 focus, which is a limited resource. That's how they mitigate the concept of having two-handed fighting in this game. But if you have an indirect or an offhand weapon, it only takes 1 focus. And what I thought was really cool about this is that it gives a little love to shield. So shield, defensive, it's automatically defensive. It means you can brace wherever you want. But now you could use it as an offhand weapon. And it only costs you 1 focus to do so. I thought that was cool, right? And you could do some other stuff with like knives and typical things that you would expect for someone to have as an offhand weapon. Pierce, no weapon has Pierce that I saw, because it's really, really good. It negates deflect, which is in essence sort of like all armor doesn't increase your armor class, like the chance to hit you. What it does is it mitigates damage, and Pierce goes past that. And that's pretty much it. Those are the ones that I thought were really interesting. Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting that I think is worth noting is that this goes into that sort of plot die concept. And by the way, this is a free PDF on DriveThruRPG that I just downloaded because I really wanted to know more about the rules. And so this was one down here, which this is just a monster, quote unquote, or someone you can attack. It's a thrill. This is like a thrill berserker. And what I thought was great is right here. Once again, they're inputting ways that you're going to be able to use these plot die so that if the player rolls something poor and the plot die, here you go. So this is just great. These are the things I like to see. And if this is just the beta, hopefully the actual handbook is riddled with these things, right? That you have these kind of little symbols all over the place. Now, some people, this might be a lot, right? Like, to be honest, I've moved away from big, bulky monster stat blocks because there's just a lot. Especially if you've got multiple types of monsters. There's a lot going on there, so that might slow things down a little bit. But I'm okay with that. Like, I know that a lot of DMs that are going to love this, and if you're sort of a MCDM fan, their monsters were fabulous, but they had a lot to them. So, anyways, that's what I wanted to pull out. I was just looking at these expertise. I looked at the expertise for the armor. It didn't really do much. Hopefully there's a lot more to it when it comes to, maybe there's going to be more choices in the actual game. Pretty much the 2 things that they did for expertise for the armor is made it less cumbersome, which means that you don't get slowed down. Like, you can move more with it, I believe, or you can move something along those lines. But presentable just means that if you're wearing that in a place that doesn't, you're supposed to have armor, you can get away with it, kind of. That's what it kind of, here they are right here. Cumbersome it's a strength requirement. The strength requirement's gone for it, so you can wear that with less strength, I suppose. I thought that there was one. Oh, and slowed. Here it is. You're not slowed, and you don't have to have the strength requirement as much, etc. So, anyways, hit the like, hit the subscribe. I think I'm going to actually do a character design through Draw Steel, because that's the other game that's getting some hype right now, and I really want to make a character in it. So I think that's my next video.